book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about some books slash series that I've binged. This is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out. You can participate in a topic in the future. This week's topic was purely inspired by the fact that I'm in lockdown. Everyone is taking it a different way. In my situation, a 1-week lockdown got extended to 5 weeks.
And since filming this video, it's been extended another month.
During this time, I have been spending all of my free time reading, but not just reading. I've been binge reading series. I just love the thrill of dedicating time to binge reading something. And I know a lot of people do want to savor things and have a slower, more appreciative reading experience. I'm different in a sense that I feel like I need to experience it as a whole, because if I get interrupted by something in the middle of reading, for example, if I read one chapter one night and then go to the next chapter the other night, sometimes I forget what happened in the previous chapter, but for some reason when I binge read something, I actually am more likely to remember it. And I know that everybody works differently, but that's how I work. Whenever I have an opportunity to binge read, I take it. I'm going to be talking about some books and series that I've binge read, some of them as of recently, but also I don't want to spoil too much of my wrap up. Yes, without further ado, let's get into the books that I binge read essentially. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are expecting Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. Now this is funny to bring up because I actually binge read this book the previous lockdown that we had, and this book came out, I'd say either March or April of last year. I remember when the book dropped, I read it in one sitting, and as soon as I finished it in one sitting, I had to go back and read it again. And then once I read it again, I read it a third time. I know this is probably because I was just recovering from anhedonia and there were a lot of books that were kind of overwhelming at the time. Also, I was living in a shared house at the time that I read this book, and I didn't have money to spend on other books, mostly because I was saving it. But also the books that I brought with me were not my extensive library. I literally only could bring like 8 cubicles of books. It was not fun at all. I was not happy at the time. But this book distracted me from that and made me feel happy, and it was one of the only books that I purchased during that period. It was just absolutely amazing, and I understand why a lot of people do not like Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth, mostly because of the way that it's told, its choppy writing style, its mixed media format that kind of doesn't match the mixed media format of the Illuminae files. Like, the Illuminae files look more appealing, more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, and also it is kind of a slow story to start off with, and the protagonist is struggling with a lot of psychological problems, which I deeply resonate with. So I understand why a lot of people don't like this book, but to the people that are scared, I would actually highly suggest it. I think that it is one of the best books that I've ever read in my entire life, and it is very much a realistic depiction of what it is like to live every day after going through trauma, essentially. So that's why I loved it so much, and I could resonate with it a lot, especially because I was going through a recovery process when I was reading it, so I felt like I wasn't alone. That's exactly why I read it 3 times over. But not only just read it 3 times over, I binge read it 3 times over. So technically this kind of counts as 3 goes. No, it counts as 5 goes. I binge read this book 5 times, but 3 times in a row. Some of you guys are already expecting this, the Malediction Trilogy. This is not a book series that I binge read during lockdown. This is a book series I binge read in January, and it is one of my favorite series of all time. It's funny because I'm filming this the Sunday prior to when it's going up, and I understand that I talked about this one in my last 7 on Sunday video, so I'm not actually going to go into too much detail here. But what I do have to say about the Malediction Trilogy is that I didn't expect it to grip me as much as it did. I didn't expect to want to binge read it or be compelled to binge read it, but I was. Danielle L. Jensen has an amazing way with words and an amazing way with the way that she writes her stories. If you haven't read it yet, and if you're considering it, stop considering it, actually pick it up. This book series I actually recently reread, but I didn't just reread it, I binge read it within like 3 days. It's a 5-book series, and that, my friends, is the Awakens series, the first series by Elise Kova. I did also binge read the second series in this world, or the spin-off series in this world. I wasn't as pleased with that series as I was with the original Awakens series. That series that I'm referring to is the Awakens Vortex Chronicles. I just wish that it stayed in the direction I thought it was going to stay from book 3. The next 2 books ended up disappointing me. Like, I understand that the character was meant to fulfill a prophecy, whatever, but I wasn't a big fan of the ending of that series. But that's just an opinion. Some people really love it, and I get it. But binge reading that series after binge reading this series, I felt like it just could not top the first series in the Awakens world. And I do understand that a bunch of people would want to continue on with the Awakens world, especially after Crystal Crowned, which is the 5th book in the series. I would say hold off for a little bit of time, distance yourself from the original Awakens series in order to just give yourself some time to remember Awakens, but also realize that the next series is not really going to have Vala or Aldrich as much as you want it to. But I'm talking about this series. Loved the first Awakens series, the original Awakens series. The first time I read this series, I felt like I read it at the wrong time. I think it was when I had finished the Remnant Chronicles. You guys already know the emotional slump I went through with that series, and I'm pretty sure I might have read this series after I read the Seven Realms series as well, which ended up being an amazing series. I didn't want the series to just sit in its shadow, but it kind of did, and I never put it on my top 20 series of 2020 because I realized that I forgot almost everything about the series. That kind of devastated me, and I was thinking to myself, well, I kind of need to reread it eventually. During lockdown, I decided I wanted to put the investment into the series, and it paid off. I'm so happy that I am attached to these characters. I love Vala as a main character. I love Aldrich. I really love this world, and I love Elise Cover's world building. It's amazing. It's a good time. I do recommend the first Awakens series as a great binge read. Next book series I have to bring up is actually a book series that I binge read a few days ago in its entirety. It's so good, and BookTube is not talking about it anymore. Do you guys remember watching Ginger Reads Lady? She was the person who facilitated Top 5 Wednesday. She recommended this series and was tweeting about it like 5 years ago, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, she actually really endorses this series. I should pick it up. That's what I thought to myself, and that was when I was like, you know what? I'm adding it to my TBR. These hardbacks are out of print now, so I understand why people aren't getting the hardbacks. Hopefully the paperbacks are still in print. If they are, I would highly recommend that you get in on this one. That, my friends, is the Conspiracy of Us series by Maggie Hall. It was a really good series. I could not recommend it enough. But here's the funny thing about the series. It does not sit under any of the categories that I read. I usually read fantasy or sci-fi. Actually, it has like a little bit of sci-fi elements to it. It's more like a mystery kind of thriller thing, like Teenage National Treasure. I don't know if I should fully compare it to that, but it has to do with treasure, and it has to do with traveling the world to find certain clues. I don't even know how to describe it. I haven't read anything like this, nor do I usually, but I really enjoyed it, and it had a good mix of everything you love in a young adult novel. It has a good hate to love romance as well. I understand that a lot of you guys really love hate to love romance as a trope. If you do, you will really eat up this series. I read all 3 books in one day. I could not stop reading it. It was really good. If you want a new young adult series that's kind of like a backlist series that's more than a duology, I would recommend this series. And it's funny because I gave the second book a 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of the best sequels I've ever read, in my personal opinion. Another book series that I actually mentioned in my previous video that I binge read in 24 hours is the Red Winter Trilogy by Annette Marie. This is an independently published book series that you probably haven't heard of if you are not really into the indie published market, but I'd say the best way to kind of recommend this book series, if you like Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kigawa, you will love Red Winter. It is really good. And funnily enough, it kind of reminds me a little bit of From Blood and Ash, only with Poppy's character. With Poppy's character, she has to be absolutely perfect, and she's not allowed to experience certain aspects of life. And that's what this protagonist also has to go through. So I would recommend it as well if you want to hear from a protagonist perspective like that. I would not fully compare it to From Blood and Ash because it's definitely, From Blood and Ash is its own thing, but I'd say it's Shadow of the Fox meets From Blood and Ash in that aspect. It is absolutely amazing, perfect on its own. It has illustrations. What more would you want? It was perfect. I gave this series around 5 out of 5 stars. I would binge read again in a heartbeat if I could. And then I have to mention a book series that I binge read, but I binge read them because they were quick reads, not necessarily because I would fully recommend them. Like, I would recommend them if you want some backstory and context regarding the spin-off series, because the spin-off series is my fave. But the original trilogy, I just more binge read because I wanted to get them out of the way. And they were addictive, and I did want to know what was going on. But in hindsight, I wouldn't say they were disappointing, but they're just guilty pleasure reads, period. That, my friends, is the Dark Elements Trilogy by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the first series before the spin-off series, which is the Harbinger series. One of my favorite trilogies. Oh, I love the Harbinger trilogy. And the reason why I rolled my eyes a lot at this series is because the Dark Elements series really heavily emphasizes the romance. So does the Harbinger series, but the Harbinger series kind of has a lot of plot to back that up. In this situation, it's a love triangle, but it's an unnecessary love triangle. It's really bad. Unnecessary because one of the guys, or at least the other side of the love triangle, is a genuinely good guy who hasn't done anything wrong. So if JLA did not write the spin-off series, I would have been so bitter after reading this series. It's just an okay series to me personally, but I appreciate it for what it is in some aspects, not all aspects, because it built the world for the Harbinger series. My second favorite series apart from Blood and Ash, even though I've only really read 3 series by JLA so far. I did binge read the series, and I think it took 2 days to binge read. I just could not put it down, but mostly because I needed to know what happened, and I just wanted to get back to the Harbinger series. Some of you guys did not expect that I would put the Iron Fey series on here, but I am. I binge read the series, essentially. People who do read it for the first time these days don't like it as much, but I did find it very addictive. And that's the thing about Julie Kagawa's writing, especially if you love urban fantasy. Her writing is super addictive. I mean, it's best for the young adult age category because there's a lot of angst when it comes to her writing, but there's a good balance of plot. Unlike the Dark Element series, which I was just talking about, Julie Kagawa kind of displays a good balance of romance and plot, and I do enjoy that about the Iron Fey series. I do enjoy that about the Shadow of the Fox series, even though the Shadow of the Fox series did not actually have that much romance in it. I only remember the 3rd book being romantic. The main 2 characters were friends majority of the series, and then all of a sudden, last minute in the final book, they realize how much they mean to each other. And even the Talon saga, there's a good balance between romance and the actual plot. That's what I felt with the Iron Fey series, and the Iron Knight is a very different kind of book. And I remember binge reading the Iron Knight and thinking to myself, okay, when are we gonna get Megan's perspective? Because it follows a different character from Megan. But then I missed the entire point of the book until the end of it, essentially. This wasn't Megan's story. This was Megan's and this character's story. Anyway, that was a revelation that I had. I'm pretty much giving a wrap up right now, which I shouldn't be doing in this video. This being said, I binge read the series and I appreciate it for what it is, and I will continue on with the novellas pretty soon, hopefully. And finally, I'm gonna talk about a book, not a series, that I binge read the other day. And it's a really long book, guys. I could not stop reading it. It's funny because I actually put this as an anticipated release for this year. I was really excited to read it, and I even put it on my TBR for this month and for last month. Didn't get to it until this week. It was the last book I finished, and that, my friends, is Bloodlike Magic by Lizelle Sambury. I thought that this book was going to be good. It ended up being great. I was instantly drawn into the fact that it had to do with first love and having to kind of go through a hate to love romance situation. But funnily enough, I read this book and I realized that yes, while the romance was good, I came out of it wanting more of the family than the romance. I'm a hopeless romantic. You guys already know this, right? But I didn't care about the romance at the end of the day. All I cared about was the family, because at the end of the day, the family is part of Voya's life in the best way possible. Guys, even Tracy Dion blurbed this, and I feel like it's not getting that much hype, and it really does need to. It's, I think, on the same level as Legendborn and maybe The Mortal Instruments. Completely different concept, but it is a futuristic urban fantasy. I recommend this book so much, and I understand that it is actually pretty slow to get through at times. It does feel like a contemporary at times because there's a lot of family aspects to it. This being said, let's just say the ending of this book is so worth it. It was the last book that I binge read. I'm really happy that I'm talking about it in this video because it is deserving of the hype. If you haven't picked it up yet, pick it up. I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to enjoy it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers, and also I have social media. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.